Now we're going to take these side pieces that you glued up with the strips. We're going to do the same thing we did with the board and plane them down, except our goal here is to plane them to the same thickness as we did the board. Now if you can't remember where you left off with your board, that's okay. Just have your board handy in your hand and just check them each time as you're planing. Maybe do a half turn here and there, as you're planing along to get them as close as you can. They don't have to be perfect, but the closer you can get them, the better it'll be after on the glue up. So I just take my board, put it up. It's easier to do on a table. And it looks like this is just a hair more than this, not even a 1/16. So I think I'm just going to take a half turn to get them to the same thickness. And that will vary depending on how far you had to plane your board as opposed to mine. Now we take our board, and I tend to put the best face down because I want it on this. Now where'd this come from? Well, let me set this up first. Best face down, best face down. So what I did is I put these together, took my tape measure and measured, and then made this, I don't know, about 1 inch smaller than my total, so that when I set this up and I put these pieces on there, I need this whiteboard to not extend beyond the extremes of these. So I need this to be a little bit smaller than these so that I have something to build on that's flat. I don't trust my tables to be perfectly flat with all the nails and things, and we've sanded them down. So I have this, and I'll glue it with this underneath, for the same reason I had it underneath the board, so that all my joints are as flat as I can make them. So now our next step is to figure out, that's how they're going to go, of course. We need to put miters here. So now you need to decide, do I want that edge, that inlay I put in on the inside or on the outside? Doesn't make a bit of difference. I tend to put mine on the inside, but there's absolutely no reason for that other than that's what I want. So I need to put miter joints. I need to put a 45 cuts that way. And there, and there. So I've marked the direction that they have to go so that they can match together and I get the corner. Now we need to cut one corner first, and then I'm going to match 2 of them together so I can mark the other end. And it's a lot of here, then back to the chop saw, then back here, marking back to the chop saw, and everything gets to be fit. This is where you really need to take your time. Go slow and make sure everything fits as you go. But you'll notice, I will never touch my tape measure doing this stuff because it's all custom to your board. I move this to 45 degrees, and it doesn't matter which direction you go, but now I'm looking, there's my mark, and I'm going to cut it this way. Again, be careful. The faster I go on my cut, the more this board is going to want to shift away from the blade. So I'm going to hold it down and really tight as I go in and cut nice and slow and even to give me the straightest cut that I can get. And I'm going to cut one end on all 4. It honestly doesn't matter which end you do, though I tend to do the same end on all 4. There's my little inlay, and I'm going to be doing the right side. Doesn't make a difference. I just need one end cut. Nice and slow will give you a nice, flat, smooth cut. I'm going to have to move that off to the corner, and we put one here, and I take any one of the 4 and put it like that. Double check that your good face is up. I've got one of them that has a knot, and I knew about that, but I want to make sure that that's down as I'm going. All right, so we check your corner. Make sure there's nothing in there. Push them together, and I'm pushing so that this corner matches up perfectly. This little white strip, this maple strip I have matches up just right. And now because I have this perfectly square, that miter is darn perfect. I mean, it's right on the money. No gaps, and that's what I wanted. So now I kind of hold that in place, and you take a sharpened pencil. Do not use a dull one. Sharp makes it a lot easier to get into the corner and just mark right here and over here, where my cut has to go. That line represents from there, I need to cut out 45, from there, out 45, and I need to make sure to cut on the far side of this line. So the blade is here. So I'm cutting on this side of the line, so the blade kerf will be there. And I can see exactly with the shadow on there. So now it's a lot of back and forth. I want to cut, so I'm cutting up to the line, right up to it. I'm either just barely cutting it off or I can just barely see it. And then when I get that done, I'm going to put this on and check, and we'll make sure as we go that they're right. The only other thing I want to make sure is that I'm putting the back in the same place. So I just mark 1 here, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, and that way I can always put them in the same place, just in case this is a little different than that or vice versa. Now I wanted to zoom in a little so you could really see what I'm doing. There's my line, and I take and I draw that line right here on the top so I can see it. So that lines up right there. Now with the shadow of the saw, I just move it until the shadow of the blade is on the right side of that line. Now I tend to undercut it, which means I know I need to cut more eventually, but I'd rather nibble my way up to the line than take a wild guess and miss it and have to remake this or solve it some other way. So I'm going a little farther out than I need. Good. And so I've just barely cut that line off. Okay, and we repeat on this one. Now this one's going to be the other way, so it's upside down because it's the other side. But that's okay, this line is still here, so I'm going to put that line there and do the same thing. I check, I'm way off, that's fine. The first one I happened to get it on the first try, this one I didn't. There we go. So I'm up to the line, and even then I could take off just a little bit more off of that. So to get just a fine cut without it moving, I put it right up to the blade and hold it, lift up, and cut. There, right on the money. Now we put these back where they were before, and we're going to do this again 2 more times at least. All right? Now I can kind of shift this down to the other end. There we go. Make sure that's perfect. So if that's perfect and I hold this in place, now I can put this one there. And that does make a really good joint right there. I can hold that in place and do the same thing there. Then shift. Make sure my joint hasn't moved at all. Good. Take this last piece, put it up against it, still giving me a nice, good, tight joint, and do the same thing that way. After taking the pieces, they're numbered again. I put the joints all together. They look pretty tight. Let's talk about what do you do if you undercut it, if you all accidentally made one of these too short. Assuming that you're not going to remake this piece, because nobody would want to do that, but you can, that is an option. What you'll have to do then is make your board a little bit smaller. You can take it to the sled in the back and nibble off a little bit of the edges until it does fit. Now yes, that does mean your squares are getting a little smaller. You might want to nibble a little off of both sides to make them even. That's up to you. But the biggest mistake that happens is people will put a mark on where they need to cut. You're supposed to cut on this side of the line and they end up cutting on this side, which means it's 1/8 of an inch too short. That happens all the time. You can also, and it's not the best fix, but it is a fix, the piece that you cut off, you can cut off 1/8 of an inch strip, cut this here, and you have a thin strip of wood that you can insert in there. The good side is it's the board itself that you're fixing it with. It's just an insert. The downside is you still will see that line a little bit. So I don't like that fix, but it does work. More than likely, the easier fix is to just change the size of your board a little or remake the piece. But for now, if everything fits and you're happy with the fit, let's go glue it up. Time to glue it together. So again, I have my good faces down. So we double check, and I know I had that knot that I wanted to make sure was facing me, so the good face was down, and all of my numbers line up. So even though I had to flip this one over and it was numbered, that's fine. The joints don't change, the width, the length here, I should say, doesn't change either, so that's fine. I'm just double checking. Now we glue, Now, I don't have anything but glue holding this together. I've seen people put biscuits in to hold everything together. That's okay, I don't mind that. But I found that this system with a board underneath keeps things from shifting around pretty well. So we always glue every joint. I'd rather have a little too much glue than too little. And we just pull off one at a time. Put a little in the miter and on the edge. Just work your way around. Okay, so there's that. And one at a time, just get everything glued together. Now, you'll notice that until this glue sets, it is slippery. It acts as kind of a lubricant, so things are moving around. So I take some of these and put them on the corners to try to keep them even, and it helps them from shifting. Helps keep things from shifting around too much. And you'll get a little glue on the ends. It usually peels off once the glue is dry. But our job is to get these joints as close as we can to perfect, so that when I tighten the clamps, there's not a whole lot of movement, not a lot of shifting that I need to worry about. Okay. And again, this is where you want to just snug things up until you see a little bit of glue squeeze out. Because if there is shifting, I want the whole thing to shift on its own. And we put some clamps the other direction. There we go, that closed up that corner pretty nice. And if these corners start to move because these little squeeze clamps aren't quite enough, you can use bigger clamps, more aggressive clamps to hold them in place. Okay, that's not too bad. Like I said, this corner's a little bit off, so I take a different clamp and squeeze it on. The other three look pretty good. Now I come back and give these a good squeeze. I'm going to straighten this one up. That one's nice and tight. Now, if you don't see any glue in the center at all, you can put another bar clamp on, which I might do. Same here. Again, I'd rather over clamp it than under clamp it. Again, it doesn't need to be monstrously tight. Good, I see a little more glue squeeze out there. That's great. But I do need it snug enough so that glue comes out. Let me just lift this up and put it underneath. Good, I see glue here and I see a little bit there. And that's good, it means it's going to have a good glue joint. We let this set probably till the next day, because I'd like to give this extra time, especially with the miter joints. And then we'll run it through the sander to get it finished to size.